Praise be, bitches! Today we will break down the acting and characters of Handmaid's Tale by Hulu. I will start out by saying the acting chops required in this show are extreme. This series, by its very nature, is largely free of dialogue. You get some help from June's inner monologue, but that has its limits. At least 50% of what would normally be dialogue is shown in glances, eye movements, fleeting facial expressions, and that ain't easy. So I will say this definitively right here and now. The entire cast puts in great performances. And not a few, but most, if not nearly all of them, managed to hit it out of the park at least once in the run of the series. I am officially voting for Emmys all around. Now to our characters. We'll start with Fred. Fred, or June, is played by Elizabeth Moss. She is your main character and the audience character. We learn almost everything from her point of view. Before Gilead, she was like any other woman. She had friends, a husband, a daughter, a job, freedom. Now she's a prisoner and a sex slave, and expected to birth a child for a woman that regularly beats her, threatens her, and even threatens her daughter. But her daughter gives her a reason to live, to survive this world. She's in a very precarious position, and early on she only goes through the motions, like sleepwalking, as she says. But then she wakes up, and she cannot not see the violence or the injustice or the general insanity of Gilead anymore. But what to do about it? She spends most of the season trying to figure that out. And then we have Serena Joy, played by Yvonne Strahovski. She is crushed. She is a shell of a woman. She is a walking ghost. She helped cause this new regime and was then completely sidelined, made into a type of slave/servant like all women are now. And her own husband just stood there and let it be done to her. So she has forced herself to believe in the system, that if she is faithful and prays and does as she is told by her husband, that God will reward her with what she wants most, a child. And I like that we see that even before Gilead, she was becoming obsessed with having a child and couldn't. This makes me wonder if she thought of handmaids in the first place. She's also petty, ruthless, violent, vindictive, and very jealous of June. And neither is she a fool. She is aware that there is a difference between how Gilead is supposed to work and how the government portrays it as working and what's actually going on. She knows hypocrisy when she sees it. And then we have the commander, Fred, played by Joseph Fiennes. I have mixed feelings on the character. He obviously played a big part in making this world a reality, and yet he finds himself as unhappy as his wife, highly conflicted with his role. His guilt shows, I think, most in his secret relationship with the previous handmaid and now with Offred. He doesn't want to think of himself as a rapist. He wants her consent. He needs to believe that she does consent and wants him and wants this life. He is perhaps just as trapped as the women in its own way, and I would feel sorry for him if not for the fact that he is a rapist bastard in more ways than one, even if I could forgive his character for the ceremony, because they are all in their own ways being forced into that, so I can have a modicum of sympathy for him there. However, it's the stuff with Jezebel's that can't be forgiven. He knows on some level that Fred cannot refuse him anything. He has all the power. So even though she is wearing some ridiculous flapper dress and smiling at him, somewhere he knows that this too is not real. But it's enough to let him lie to himself, and maybe that keeps him from slitting his wrists. I also get the strong impression that he is not ambitious, or frankly all that bright or cunning. Serena Joy seems to be much more those things. I highly suspect she was the power behind the man, that she was the one pushing him towards becoming powerful, towards influencing the right people, getting in with the right crowd, and really being something. I'm willing to bet she is most of the reason that he is where he is today. The irony. Of Warren / of Daniel / Janine, played by Madeline Brewer. Poor, crazy Janine. You really feel for her. Special shout out to Madeline Brewer because it is not easy to play crazy. I love that we see the slow descent into madness of Janine. The first time we see her at the Red Center, she's lounging in her chair with her arms crossed on her chest, muttering and kind of back-talking at how much bullshit this is. And then they take her eye. And then they make her sit at the center of a circle and recount the worst things that have ever happened to her. And then they tell her it was all her fault. That if she had been a good girl, nothing bad would have happened to her. They break her down completely. And she breaks so much that parts of her never repair. She is broken permanently. But there's enough left there for her to decide that, okay, I'll be the good girl. I will do what I am told in life, and therefore life will be good to me. This almost works, too. Except her commander is a horny, kinky bastard who fills her head with fantasies of running away together with her baby. I like that we see her unravel for a second time, and that her status is unknown going into season 2. I sincerely hope we see Janine again. Of Glenn / Emily, played by Alexis Bledel. My wings off to her. Of Glenn is another handmaid and our introduction to the Resistance and Mayday. She's a lesbian and a little eager to push the bounds of Gilead. She has a secret relationship with a Martha that ends in death for the Martha and mutilation for Emily. And still she is not broken. She is damaged, yes, but she is still fighting. I really like her character and her spirit. Her status too is unknown, and I hope she returns for season 2. Aunt Lydia, played by Anne Dowd. I think her most of all. I would like to know what her story of before Gilead was. I have this image of her as the church organ lady / world's strictest Sunday school teacher. She too is a true believer, but she is much more of a zealot than Serena Joy. Serena believes in Gilead because she has to, not because she agrees with it. Aunt Lydia, however, does agree with it, and believes all the more in everything she does. She believes she is helping save these girls, that they were wanton, wayward women, and now they're being shown the way to glory and salvation. She serves perhaps as an insight into the propaganda and indoctrination for the handmaids, best shown in the 2-line,
"Oh, you are so lucky!"
Please remove the damaged ones.
Mrs. Waterford, ma'am, whatever punishment these girls had to endure was for the greater good. They deserve to be honored just like everyone else.
This is Aunt Lydia. She believes in punishment, but also in redemption. She's arguably the character we should hate the most, and there's something about her I just love, and I want to see a lot more. Here we have Nick, played by Max Minghella. Sorry if I'm totally butchering your name. Okay, slight confession time. From the book, I never much cared for the character of Nick, and the show has not changed that. They did definitely portray him exactly the same way as portrayed in the book. This is not a knock on the performance or the actor, and the character is very much needed. He is the only other man in the house. Well, kind of in the house. He lives over the garage and drives the commander around and helps Serena with her garden. And he's an eye, a confirmed spy for the government. And he's living in the commander's house to spy on him, on the orders of the one man higher up. And he knows everything that is going on. He knows about the Scrabble games, he knows about Jezebels, probably knows a lot of other things too. Leaving the question of why hasn't he reported any of it. That makes him interesting. For me, this is good because the other side to him is being besotted with June, and that relationship just doesn't read for me. This may be intentional to a point, as his love is supposed to be largely unreciprocated. June is using him, Serena's using him. This would normally make me feel sorry for him, but when I look of Nick and I think of that scene, that very poignant scene of him learning that June is pregnant and putting his hand on her stomach in a moment that is supposed to be loving and tender and sad and heartbreaking. And all I was thinking was, how much of this sap do I have to choke down? Nick is not tragic to me. He's a pathetic whiner that I just want to punch in the face. Meet of Glen 2.0, played by Tatiana Jones. Now a handmaid, in the previous life, she was a junkie and a prostitute. So for her, this place isn't so bad. She follows the rules because it's a way better life than her old one. So, don't fuck this up for me is her motto. And who can blame her? It makes total sense. And it likewise makes total sense that she's the first to crack when she sees the system turn on itself and potentially turn on her. I will cover this in much more depth in the relevant episode. This is Martha. Well, this is a Martha. Her name is Rita, played by Amanda Burgell. She is a servant in the commander's household. She does the cooking and on salvaging days the shopping. And an interesting aspect of her station is that she has some power, sort of. She's the keeper of the tokens, which are used instead of money to get food because who needs money in a dystopian society? So she has some say over what food is brought and served on a daily basis. This is very interesting. She's also not all that kind to Alfred, and is somewhat kind to Serena Joy. We also find out she has a dark backstory as well. We're not really sure how she got to be where she is, but we do know she has lost and that she was opposed to the regime she now finds herself trapped in. She's a character I hope we see more of as the series goes on, and I'm almost certain we will because at the end of the season, she was left in possession of something very important. Now, one of my favorite characters, Moira. From the book, she has always been my favorite, played by Samara Wiley. She is awesome. Pot-smoking, free-spirited lesbian. How I'd like one of my very own. She's June's longtime friend from the before, and was a resistance fighter from the beginning. She is most irrepressible. So much so, she gets passed over for handmaid status despite being fertile. And while she does get knocked down for a while, she does indeed get back up and is the first person we see truly escape from Gilead. And she is someone who has spent time in that world and is now being returned to the outside world. There are so many possibilities with this, I cannot wait. June's husband, Luke, is played by O.T. Fagbenley. I seriously apologize if I'm saying that wrong. His character is a bit hard to explain for me. We get limited time with him because of the nature of the series. He's believed dead for a large part of the season. He's June's husband from before and father to Hannah. However, he was married to someone else before June, which in the book is a very big part of the plot, and in the show is a couple lines that you can miss if you're not paying attention. But he seems like a good guy for the most part, if you forget the cheating on his wife and then divorcing her for June part. He's very protective of Moira, and he is kind and sympathetic when shit starts hitting the fan. But he's a little too kind and a little too naive. He's the one that insists they wait for visas instead of leaving earlier, and because they did, they don't make it out. And when I say they, his family doesn't. But he does. He may not be too bright in trying to shoot it out with a bunch of Black Ops guys instead of running with his wife and child, but the resourcefulness and the courage and bravery we see later on does help make up for that. He does make it out, but I like that he doesn't want to leave them. He wants to go back for them, even though we know how ridiculous an idea that is. And he gets a good moment when confronted with just how impossible going back and getting them out is going to be right now, of making that heartbreaking choice that he has to leave, that is what is best for right now, that he might be able to come back and help them later, but only if he's alive to do so. So he has been up in Canada for 3 years, waiting and hoping. And lastly, I will mention Hannah, played by Jordana Blake. We don't see all that much of Hannah, so there's not much I can say. She's a child. That is her role. The young actress certainly plays it very well, and it should be noted it is the same actress playing 5-year-old Hannah and 8-year-old Hannah. I'm not sure why, but I don't mind it. She's adorable and cute, and the lines she has are delivered very well. And that is most of the cast for Season 1 of The Handmaid's Tale by Hulu. There are some other minor characters that I didn't mention. I will cover them within the episodes where they are relevant. Until then, I am Insane Lane. Blessed be, bitches.